In the U.S. right now, all day, every day, we breathe in the awareness that we're incredibly polarized. Yet many of us live pretty siloed lives. So other than barbs traded on the internet or town halls that go crosswise and security intervenes, we don't really talk. Along with my colleagues over on the Slate podcast How To, we've been working on a series called Living at Odds. It's our effort to capture Americans who right now see things really differently and still have real relationships. And when I thought of people in my life who do this, I thought of Andrew Schneider. Andrew Schneider leads Fairness West Virginia, a statewide organization advocating for LGBTQ rights where I'm from in West Virginia. For the last decade, he's been the only full-time lobbyist at the state capitol working on LGBTQ issues. And what's been remarkable about his tenure is that he's been quite effective at cultivating relationships with Republicans, sometimes to co-sponsor legislation or to quietly kill bills. But not all of them. He says the last legislative session that just ended was, quote, the most challenging session for LGBTQ plus rights that I've ever seen. But Andrew's style is not to organize protests and social media pressure campaigns to try to be effective. His work is slower, more relational. He tries to bring people who don't start out as allies over to his side. And this has been his organizing style for more than 30 years, when he decided to leave the New York City suburbs, where he grew up, for a conservative college in Virginia to see if he could effectively organize for civil rights there. In this episode, I talked to Andrew about his theory of change that involves reaching out to lawmakers who sometimes disappoint him. I also talked to a former Republican legislative leader who was convinced to stand up against a bill with Andrew and then got primaried and lost re-election. And Andrew and I talk about the recent tests to his patient approach at the Capitol as he's faced insults and even threats of arrest.
Things would be great if we were a blue state, but that's not where the work is so crucial, because it's the places where there are fewer resources where this work must be done. And that's the work that attracts me.
This is Death, Sex, and Money, the show from Slate about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. I'm Anna Sale. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. Do you know that feeling when you're trying to book a trip, but there are just too many choices, too much fine print, no real way to know if you're actually getting the best deal? Maybe you start trying to book 3 or 4 times before you actually have the confidence to do it. Smart Travel will help you get out of your own way, skip the stress, and book with confidence. NerdWallet's travel journalists break down the pros and cons of travel decisions, like when lounge access is worth paying for, when a travel agent can actually save you money, and which hotel loyalty programs give you the best value. So before you book, learn how to get the most out of your travel dollars. Follow Smart Travel on your favorite podcast app, and stay tuned later in the show for a special segment on travel. Betsy Orndorff Sayers is the mayor of Wardensville, West Virginia, a town of less than 400 people, not too far from Washington, D.C. In between water maintenance issues and road construction controversies, she found herself on a phone call about civil rights protections for LGBTQ residents.
Andrew was a random cold call.
He called you?
No, I called him.
Oh, interesting.
We had an event here in our community where we had a member of our community actually physically assaulted because of her sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And the lack of what I want to say response was horrifying, devastating. And it's like, what can we do?
The assault happened outside town limits, but the victim was well known in Wardensville. Mayor Betsy felt the need to respond.
This is a young lady who, in her younger years, hosted basketball camps. She went to school here. Partner worked at the local restaurant. And I don't think anybody thought anything about it. It was just this awful thing happened. And we can't change what's happened, but what is in place legislatively in our state that we can look at, and quickly found out there's not a whole heck of a lot.
West Virginia does not include LGBTQ people in its hate crimes law. There's also no statewide civil rights protections regarding sexuality or gender identity in housing, public accommodations, or employment.
And then I'm Googling, and then I found Fairness West Virginia and had a call and said, this is kind of what we're looking for.
Mayor Betsy saw that other towns and cities were working with Fairness West Virginia, an advocacy organization, to pass so-called fairness ordinances to explicitly add LGBTQ residents to their local civil rights laws. In 2024, Wardensville became the 20th municipality in West Virginia to pass a local fairness ordinance, just a few weeks after Donald Trump won 77.9% of the vote in their county.
I think it was a no-brainer in the sense that we can't discriminate. And there were no nay votes when we passed the ordinance.
How does something like that pass in a town like Wardensville, West Virginia? Andrew, how do you think about that?
Well, I think that there were a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump not because they hate gay people, not because they are anti-LGBTQ. A lot of people in these small towns in West Virginia have gay family members, have, trans neighbors, have, people in their lives who are LGBTQ, who they love.
Andrew Schneider is the director of Fairness West Virginia. It's a standalone group, not an affiliate of a national LGBTQ rights organization. And Andrew's been the director since 2014.
That was 10 years ago, so I was 44.
44 years old, raised in New York City.
Born in New York City, raised in the suburbs of New York City.
Jewish.
Mm-hmm. Jewish.
Gay.
And Yankee.
And Yankee. Andrew had spent time in West Virginia before. He led the ACLU there earlier in his career, and that's how I first met him. When I was in high school, I had interned for the ACLU and even joined a lawsuit challenging my hometown's juvenile curfew ordinance. We lost. Andrew came to town after I'd left for college, and he was excited to see what he could get done in West Virginia. When he was in college, he'd been an aggressive and effective campus organizer for the ACLU, not on a liberal campus. He intentionally picked out a school in the South, Washington and Lee University in Virginia, named for George Washington and Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general.
Basically, I wanted to go to the most conservative school I could find so that I could prove that, in forming an ACLU chapter on that campus, that the ACLU could flourish in the most conservative landscape possible.
When Andrew started at Fairness West Virginia, the legislature was newly controlled by Republicans. He went to work. Within 2 years, a Republican leader that Andrew had targeted took to the floor of the state Senate to make a moral appeal to his colleagues.
Senator from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. This issue's not easy.
This is Mitch Carmichael in 2016, the then Republican majority leader in West Virginia's state Senate. At issue was a bill to purportedly protect religious freedom in West Virginia. Carmichael rose to speak to his colleagues in favor of an amendment that would explicitly say the bill was not to be used to discriminate against LGBTQ people.
I prayed for clarity, wisdom, and discernment on this. I don't think I've ever mentioned our faith in a debate in this Senate chamber, or in the House chamber for that matter, even though that it colors and influences everything we do. And it should. It does and it should. I believe in the goodness of people. I want the poor to be rich and the weak to be strong. And when we build walls, we diminish that. I just think this sends the wrong message, Mr. President. I think we need to value the human dignity and the goodness in people. And I don't want us to go down this path. I just don't.
That year, after Senator Carmichael's floor speech, the religious freedom legislation, a bill that Fairness West Virginia called the License to Discriminate bill, failed to pass.
And it was just like, unbelievable. And I think it was in part because Senator Carmichael sort of showed the emotional struggle that he went through on the floor of the Senate, that he got votes from his colleagues to vote that bill down that we didn't ever expect.
That's interesting that you think that him modeling that this wasn't an easy issue. He understood that this was a difficult vote
and
for some.
I think it wasn't just, if he had just simply voted against that bill without sort of baring his heart to the public and to his colleagues, I don't think it would have been quite as overwhelmingly a vote in defeat of that bill.
I remember seeing Carmichael's floor speech on social media when it happened, and it is not what I expected from Senator Mitch Carmichael. I've also known him for a long time. I covered him in the West Virginia State House when I was just starting out as a reporter. I remembered him as an outspoken conservative who was not afraid to take on a fight.
You probably knew me when I first came into the legislature, and they were like, gosh, this right-wing flamethrowers in here. And I didn't change. Have always been a conservative, fiscal conservative, and social conservative in many respects. I come at it from a Christian perspective, and my view was always for openness and dialogue, and that was my perspective, but wasn't everyone's.
Carmichael was just the kind of legislator Andrew Schneider targeted when he started lobbying for Fairness West Virginia. There was a political sea change underway in the state. For generations, socially conservative Democrats, like Joe Manchin, had held the power. And that changed in the 2014 election, just as Andrew was coming on the scene.
The big news in West Virginia was that the legislature flipped to Republican control for the first time in 83 years. And my entire board, I remembered, was distraught. They thought that we had lost LGBTQ non-discrimination for generations. And I had a different opinion.
The newly elected legislators were Republicans, yes, but they were also younger than many of the Democrats they defeated.
And those who were younger had grown up with LGBTQ friends and neighbors and family members who had come out in the last, decade and a half.
Oh, interesting.
And so my thinking was, I think this provides a real opportunity.
And you were catching them at a moment when the brand of what Republican leadership was going to look like wasn't set yet.
That's right.
Part of that new brand was Republicans needed to show that they could create greater prosperity in West Virginia than the Democrats they were replacing. That meant creating a culture that was friendly and inviting to outside business investment. Now, remember where things were in the first few months of 2016. President Obama was still in office. A Supreme Court decision had made marriage equality the law of the land in 2015. And Andrew cajoled legislators that with no statewide civil rights protections, West Virginia was out of step.
Marriage equality would be sort of the icing on the cake. The cake still had to be baked. So it was this odd sort of realization that we got the icing on the cake before the cake was ever baked.
And to get that done, Andrew had to make new relationships with Republicans, like Mitch Carmichael.
If you were describing Andrew's personality to someone who hadn't met him, how would you describe him?
I think Andrew is, when you first meet him, you get the sense of he's interested in you. So you talk to him, and he conveys that sense of, not just like this is about Andrew. It's more about like how, he wants to get to know you on a personal level. And so in my interactions with Andrew, he was always just very not militant about issues, very informative and respectful and courteous.
Was he persistent?
Oh, my gosh. Yes. I mean, to the point of almost annoying. I mean, but he's a great guy. I'm not saying that, but he is incredibly persistent. And, often I would come to my office and, somebody would say, hey, Andrew's been here to, and I was like, of course he has. But, he continues to come back and follow up rather than say, okay, I understand that. He would always say, but, and then just dig right into why those things could be overcome. He would never really accept the fact that it was almost impossible. He would continue to work towards his objective, again, to the point that it was almost like, Andrew, are you understanding what I'm saying? This is hard to get to. And he would, yes, it's hard, but it's the right thing to do. And, he was very good at that.
Were you ever concerned in having a conversation where you were laying it out like that he might go back to his membership or his board or social media and say, this is what Senator Carmichael told me, we've got to shame him, with...
No, not really. I never had a feeling that I was exposed or politically or vulnerable from a conversation with Andrew. I think there was a trust factor there that he held that in confidence. I don't think he would betray a confidence. His reputation was more important to him than that, which says a lot about him. I think he understood, obviously, that he was not in a position of strength, that knowledge and conveying he wasn't just going to muscle something through politically. He needed to make informed conversations with members, and he did that. With me, particularly, he did that, and others too. But that's the way he came at it.
And that style of lobbying in 2016 culminated in Senator Carmichael's speech on the Senate floor.
I work hard for jobs and opportunity. For those reasons, I would ask that we adopt this amendment, and then we can vote for this bill, allow it not to be used for discriminatory purposes, to value the religious freedom and protection that we hold so dear, and to recognize the human dignity and goodness of people that are different than us. Thank you.
Is there further discussion?
The bill died that year. What happened to you as a result of making that floor speech?
Yeah, and I've reminded Andrew of this because it was immediate reaction. Social media and so forth, and sometimes I'd walk down the streets and somebody shout a slur.
Like say something like "you love gay people" or something.
Yeah, that kind of
but like
thing.
a more ugly language.
Well, that yes, more ugly language, and we're in the political process, so we hear all these things, and then there was a concerted effort to utilize that speech and other comments against me in political campaigns and so forth. I mean, to the point where that was the primary campaign tool of those in a political primary in particular that sought to portray me as some far left wing person, which anybody it is so funny. Like that issue is a true conservative in my mind says live your own life.
Do you think it's partially why you lost your election in 2020?
Yeah, 100%. Yes,
not partially.
Yeah, not 100%. There are other reasons. I led the charge on, right to work and, reforming our education system and those kind of things. But that issue was extremely beneficial to my opponents.
Carmichael lost in the Republican primary, with evangelical churches organizing against him from the right and teachers' unions criticizing him from the left. And a few years later, a version of the Religious Freedom Protection Bill that Carmichael opposed passed the West Virginia legislature and is now state law. Carmichael is not the only ally that Andrews lost at the West Virginia Capitol in the last 9 years. Coming up, was there a low watermark of your time at the Capitol where you realized I'm unable to operate in the way that
there was a year that I was that I was threatened with arrest for doing my job.
By whom?
By several Republican House members.
Nothing boosts your confidence like when your hair looks great, am I right? And if your hair is changing in ways that you're not into, like you notice it's thinning, I know that you might want to do something about it. You might want to check out Hers Hair. Hers Hair treatments are made with doctor-trusted prescription ingredients and come in a variety of options, including oral and topical solutions. Getting started is simple with a quick online hair quiz, and you'll be connected with a provider to discuss your personalized treatment plan. Everything is 100% online, no pharmacy trips, doctor office visits, or insurance required. Treatments start at just $35 a month. And the best part? You can get thicker, fuller, healthier hair and start seeing regrowth in as little as 3 to 6 months. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/DSM. That's forhers.com/DSM for your personalized hair loss treatment options. Forhers.com/DSM. Individual results may vary. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Shopping at Saks is the easiest way to discover the best new styles to elevate your everyday look, especially when you're short on time. At Saks, you'll find inspiration for every occasion, from casual outfits to special events. Here's a true story. Just the other day, I realized that I don't really have a pair of quick slip-on sneakers that I feel cool in. And I actually searched on my laptop, cool mom sneakers. And that was not a very fruitful internet search. And then I went to Saks.com and I just searched under shoes and then sneakers. And I could get a good look at what's on trend, what is classic. I could think about what is the right sneaker for me in 2025. It was like having a current lookbook to help me figure out my particular cool mom sneaker identity. The thing that I can just put on with jeans and make work for errands around the neighborhood, or wear for a cool, casual look at my next work event. I'm still mulling my exact pair, but while I was there at Saks.com, I hopped over to the accessories vertical and checked out a pair of Elisa Johnson sunglasses that are also very cool. Whether you're refreshing your entire wardrobe or shopping for a vacation or just trying to find some everyday sneakers, Saks makes it fun and easy. If you are looking for a fun, effortless shopping experience and want to elevate your personal style, head to Saks. That's Saks.com for everyday inspiration. Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. NerdWallet's travel journalists break down the pros and cons of travel decisions, like when premium economy is worth it and when you're just paying extra for a slightly bigger armrest, or whether booking direct is cheaper than using third-party sites. I can tell you, like, when I have made smart money decisions, when I have planned travel, it makes the travel experience, like, even more exciting and cool. I fondly recall a vacation I took to Thailand in 2013. I had wanted to take a solo international vacation, but I didn't know if I had the nerve or the money. And then I found a flight with airline miles, and I got some really great tips about must-sees from family that were living there at the time. I climbed, I snorkeled, I took a cooking class, I rode the overnight train north, I went south and was on the beaches, and I feel so proud that I just did it. I made some decisions and went on that adventure. Getting that extra confidence and a little less stress can make all the difference when you're planning an amazing trip. So before you book, learn how to get the most out of your travel dollars. Follow Smart Travel on your favorite podcast app. This is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. I'm Anna Sale. Andrew Schneider was born in New York City. His first time living near West Virginia was as a teenage college student.
I remember my two top choices for college were Washington and Lee University, a school where Robert E. Lee is buried on campus and was, at the time at least, very much a shrine to the Confederacy. And Bates College, small liberal arts college in Maine, that was founded by abolitionists.
Which side are you on, Andrew?
Well, my family was divided. There was like a little civil war within my family.
His mom and stepdad were on Team Bates. His dad was rooting for Washington and Lee. It was 1990, and Andrew already had started to think of himself as a civil rights activist. He wanted to see if he could be effective in a more unfamiliar environment, and he decided to go south.
When you were choosing to leave the New York metro area to go to Lexington, Virginia, at that point, did you know you were gay?
Yeah. I've known I was gay since I was like 4. It's in my earliest memories. I just suppressed it.
When did you come out?
I didn't come out until I was 26, so I was still in the closet even throughout college.
Were you honest with yourself that you were gay at that point in your life when you went to college?
That is a tough question. I would say that I didn't think about it. I just, I didn't date at all. I just kept that, I kept that part of me suppressed because I was not comfortable. I basically, and it's funny because I had seen sort of other kids who were, sort of targeted because they were effeminate or targeted because they were, they appeared to be gay, whether they were or not. And I didn't want to be targeted in that way. So I basically became sort of agnostic in terms of sexuality.
Yeah.
And so I just continued to just not date. And it wasn't a factor in my life at the time. I didn't think about it too much. I mean, I thought about it, of course, in my private head, but I just didn't, it wasn't my focus.
I think I'm maybe applying a 2024 lens to decisions you were making in 1990. because there's so much conversation about wanting to make sure queer kids are in places where they're safe.
Yeah.
And it sounds like for you, that wasn't part of the calculus of like, maybe this is going to be less open to me personally as I figure out if I'm going to be out. That just like wasn't part of your decision-making process. It wasn't like Bates was a place you could truly be yourself and Washington and Lee was a place you could figure out how to survive.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I was more interested in political change, being trying to be a change maker and trying to engage in public policy and discussion of the issues of the day. I wasn't a normal kid, and I say that proudly. Most normal kids make their decision on whether the school offers the kinds of disciplines that they're interested in studying, or whether it's a party school, or whether it's the kind of environment, like you are pointing out, is conducive to their love interests. And that was as far away from my focus as could be. I was more interested in a school where I could test this political theory out.
Andrew's entrance to civil rights advocacy was through the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. It wasn't gay rights necessarily that first captivated Andrew. It was the ACLU's focus on First Amendment issues like protecting free speech.
I was introduced by my stepdad. He was like this old-time lefty from the McCarthy era. Mm-hmm. So I become like an ACLU groupie by latter years.
As a teen?
As a teen, yeah. And the 88 presidential campaign was really the turning point.
He said, "I am a card-carrying member of the ACLU." That was what he said. He is out there out of the mainstream. He is very
George H.W. Bush, the Republican nominee, running against Michael Dukakis, the Democratic nominee. Bush attacked Dukakis as a card-carrying member of the ACLU.
I'm not questioning his patriotism. He goes out and says, "Man is questioning my patriotism," and then all the liberal columnists join in. I am not. I am questioning his judgment on these
Dukakis
matters.
seemed unwilling or unable to defend himself.
Of course the vice president's questioning my patriotism. I don't think there's any question about that.
And so I got really sort of activated by that.
You felt like he was back on his heels, didn't know how to respond.
They didn't respond at all.
Didn't engage.
They didn't engage. They didn't do, what was most unsatisfactory to me was that they didn't defend the ACLU or his membership in the organization that I thought was the most patriotic organization on the planet, defending the original values of the Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. What could be more American except for maybe apple pie? Mm-hmm. So I was just floored.
How long were you on campus before the ACLU chapter for Washington and Lee was established?
Oh, it was established right away. I went dorm room to dorm room asking my class to become card-carrying members at the $5 student rate, and ended up recruiting 80 classmates to join.
Your first semester?
My first semester. 80 students. That was 20% of my class.
Do you think talking about civil liberties on a small liberal arts campus in Virginia, on a conservative campus, did it shift how you saw any particular issues? What shifted for you?
I mean, it's probably one of the most life-changing, impactful choices I've ever made in my life, because the two things that I learned was how to listen. I never, really factored that in as being an effective tool in advocacy. But at Washington Lee University, I quickly realized that if I sat back and let someone talk to me who came from a different political perspective and didn't sort of jump in and judge and try to correct immediately, but I just simply let them talk. And I was just, someone who was happy to listen to them. They would then trust me. And then we could actually have a meaningful conversation where ultimately I could inject my views, that we could actually have a back and forth that was productive.
I think you said you learned two things.
Yes.
What was the second?
Second is I was, surrounded by people who had different viewpoints than me, so I had to be able to think quickly on my feet. And when someone would ask me about, flag burning or, should the Confederate flag be protected under the First Amendment and other issues, I had to have a quick answer. I had to be able to also parry with them if they came back with arguments to the contrary, to be able to, win and prevail in these debates and these arguments. I mean, friendly arguments.
Mm-hmm. You learned that listening enabled you to establish a relationship.
Yeah.
At the same time, you were always trying to win the debate. Is that right?
That was the purpose of being there. Yeah, I couldn't just simply let them hold their views if I disagreed with them, but I wanted to gain their trust first to be able to have that conversation where I could ultimately change their views.
That's what I think is interesting about the way you work, Andrew, is you have an ability to forge relationships with people that you might not expect that you'd have close working relationships with. And also, you're needling them all the while to get them on your side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am.
Coming up, how increased polarization and hostility nationally around LGBTQ issues changed the way Andrew Schneider moves around the West Virginia state capitol. When you go stand outside offices and try to work the way you were able to work in 2016, meeting with both Republicans and meeting with Democrats, how's it different?
There is a lot less open-mindedness. Like a lot of the legislators, the newer legislators who've been recently elected are further to the right. It's also that those who were the moderates of, 4, 5, 6, 8 years ago have now been sort of squeezed by the far-right base of the party to not come out in support of these issues anymore.
And that's not something you can break through by showing up and listening?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried. The magic is gone.
This episode is brought to you by Discover. If you've listened to Death, Sex, and Money for a while, you know how important acceptance is when it comes to personal growth. And you know who else is big on acceptance? Discover. You see, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. That's a whole lot of places and a whole lot of acceptance, which is great for Discover, but even better for you. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/credit card. Vacation season is nearly upon us. This year, maybe treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve with Quince's high-quality travel essentials at fair prices. I recently looked at my carry-on luggage that I have been using for more than a decade and decided I need an upgrade. And I have become picky about the right kind of carry-on. I want it to not be too big and also easy to carry on, even when I've got to travel with heavy recording equipment. Check out what Quince has on offer for carry-ons. I went with this beautiful purplish wine-colored carry-on. It has a hard shell exterior, 4 wheels for easy transport, and it works when I carry it on really well and on trips where I have a little extra time and children's hands to hold. When I check it, I know it's going to be easy to spot, not just one of a zillion black or dark bags that are coming out of the baggage claim. And this carry-on bag, it was a good price. All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Even their premium luggage options and stylish luxe tote bags and travel bags to carry it all in. How does Quince make all of this a good value? By partnering directly with top factories. And they cut out the cost of the middleman and pass the savings on to us. Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. For your next trip, treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve from Quince. Go to quince.com/DSM for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/DSM to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/DSM. I first talked to Andrew Schneider for this episode back in September. He told me then how much more difficult his job had become. And then the 2024 election happened, making it even tougher.
The legislature that used to have the most Republicans was Wyoming, and after the November election, we leapfrogged over Wyoming to become the most highly concentrated Republican legislature in the country.
We are talking just a few days after the most recent legislative session ended. How would you describe the legislative session?
It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal.
This was the most challenging session for LGBTQ plus rights that I've ever seen, Andrew wrote in an email to supporters after the session ended earlier this month. Lawmakers passed legislation defining a man and a woman under state law. They passed a bill that people have to use bathrooms of their gender assigned at birth in all state-owned facilities. And on trans health care for minors, they undid a narrow exception that a doctor could authorize care if a minor was at risk of self-harm or suicide. That was a carve-out that Andrew had quietly fought for. The new bill prohibits any gender-affirming care for minors, including hormones.
First couple of weeks were almost entirely devoted to anti-LGBTQ issues. The governor ran on anti-trans issues and made this a priority of his legislative agenda.
And playing defense this year meant staying behind the scenes for Andrew. Demonstrations or online petitions, or asking lawmakers to be out front with opposition, really resisting loudly in any way, Andrew worried, could work against LGBTQ rights.
It is best for us to not draw a lot of attention to some bills over others, because we don't want to put undue pressure on leadership that we're expecting to kill those bills, and they will have much more difficulty killing those bills if their rank and file are, trying to knock down their office door.
This last legislative session, did people take meetings with you? Newly elected Republicans, did you find that they were interested in taking a meeting with you?
Yeah. Because in West Virginia, it's not like you have to make an appointment to walk into a legislator's office, particularly in the House side. So you essentially were just walking into their office and extending your hand and introducing yourself.
But Andrew's comfort at the Capitol these days is different than it used to be. Things changed for him in 2021. Because of COVID, there were strict rules for how lobbyists could move around the Capitol. You could only enter if you had an appointment. So Andrew would set up one appointment and then move around to visit with other lawmakers. It's what all lobbyists were doing, Andrew says. But a handful of Republican lawmakers singled him out and threatened him with arrest if he broke the rules. That eventually got the Capitol Police and staff watching him too.
The sergeant of arms confronted me, yelling at me, telling me that, reissuing the threat that I would be arrested and kicked out of the Capitol if I continued this so-called behavior. It was just crazy.
Did that experience change the way you thought about your ability to do your work as a political operator, in the way that your theory of change that you described, as a young person, as an ACLU organizer on the campus of Washington Lee, the theory of change was, I'm going to try to talk to anybody. I'm not going to be able to convince everybody, but I'm going to try to talk to everybody. Did that make you realize in a new way the limits of your ability to be relational and open and effective?
Yeah, it did give me some pause. I knew from another friendly Republican legislator that the House Republican Caucus had this listserv, and these 4 legislators, these 4 House members that had a target on my back were saying things. One of them was calling me a faggot. Another was threatening to trip me in the hallway if they saw me. Another one was making fun of the face mask that I was wearing. It was a rainbow face mask so that I would be easily identifiable as to who I represented in the COVID era, when we had to cover half of our faces with a face mask to protect one another. And I was also told that no one was standing up for me. That was a change maker. The bullies were in full control because no one was standing up to them. And that's what changed. I think that singularly changed the dynamic with how I was able to operate. The attitudes of the moderate Republicans changed dramatically. All of a sudden, these Republicans who would sponsor our bills wouldn't sponsor our bills anymore. They were afraid.
Did that personally hurt you? You'd put in a lot of effort for a lot of these relationships.
Yeah, of course it did. Because I put my heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
I remember after that moment, there was a legislator who was willing to sponsor a bill of ours, but they didn't want it to be introduced until the very last day that a bill could be introduced, so they wouldn't get harmed by sponsoring an LGBTQ bill. The other thing is that legislator just would not meet with me in public spaces with other people around. Every time I needed to talk to him about the bill that he was going to sponsor, or a bill that he was going to help us, defeat. We had to meet in some place where we wouldn't be seen talking to each other.
And when you are told this, I will do something that will help your issue, but I don't want it to hurt my other issues, or I don't want to be seen with you in public. Do you respond in the way of this legislator's being pragmatic, I get it, or do you feel like you can push back and be like, come on, are you with us or are you not?
I respond with a little bit of pushback. I'll roll my eyes. I'll say really, give them a hard time in a sort of joking way. But at the end of the day, I need to get their support. Am I going to, reject that because of my own ego, my own feelings? No.
Can I just push back on that a little bit? Because
yeah, of course.
I wonder, you just described that the real change in the environment at the Capitol, that you felt it not when there were the flamethrowers, but when the moderates who could be supporters of you and who you had relationships with didn't stand on their own 2 feet and stand up for you when people were tossing slurs around? Is there a cost to accepting support that's done in a way that's not as bold as it could be? You letting them off the hook?
Yeah. Well, the alternative is not getting any support at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that is a solution. I mean, the environment's going to change ultimately. The pendulum swings back and forth, but I think it's incredibly important to have bipartisan support for our bills, to establish a placeholder for another session to make sure that these bills stay alive and are out there in the public. And at the end of the day, this guy might not want to meet with me in public, fine. But his name is going to be on the bill. That's public.
Mm-hmm. Where would you have your non-public meetings that session?
We'd find an empty committee room or something, or, a part of the Capitol where there weren't a lot of people.
It's kind of funny that somebody who doesn't want to be seen in public with the lobbyist for the LGBTQ organization ends up, you all have to cruise for a private area, like you're cruising for a place to have a meeting.
Yeah. Right.
And Andrew, what do you do when you have a day where you have heard one too many insulting things or one too many things that violates your values? Like, what do you do when you have that impulse to just want to land a punch back?
I don't. I have trained myself over the years to not respond in kind with some off-color remark, or someone gets angry at me. I respond calmly. I try to de-escalate rather than escalate. It's the only way to prevail with a political system that's stacked against you. Now, there are some legislators who are, clearly, I know I'm not going to change their minds, but many of them are not in that group. I would say many of the legislators are people who just don't have enough knowledge of these issues. And I feel like the more they can, talk to someone that doesn't involve someone wagging their finger at them, but it's going to sort of weave it into the conversation and bring it up, in a casual way that's not going to put them, their shoulders against the wall. And you can't block people off. At least I feel I can't. I know people evolve. I've seen people evolve.
Speaking of just talking to people like normal people, you told me about a conversation you had with a lawmaker about pride floats in a river. Will you tell me that story?
Yeah.
About that conversation you had?
This was back in 2016. This legislator who I was meeting with said, I have an issue I want to talk to you about that's been bothering me. I said, what is it? He said, I was at I had heard about the Pride Festival that just took place. And he said, I think it's incredibly inappropriate for there to be a penis float in like a penis-shaped float in the Kanawha River during
the river that flows past the West Virginia Capitol. Okay.
Yeah, right. And he said, I think that's just really offensive, and I think that is what people dislike about your community. And I said, well, with all due respect, if you can take issue with me for that, then I guess I can take issue with you for, heterosexuals burning couches after a WVU football game in Morgantown. And he laughed and he said, "Yeah, I guess you have a point there."
Andrew, I just love that you are doing the good work of talking about penis-shaped floats at pride events at the West Virginia Capitol. I just love.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many of those kind of conversations I have over the years.
That's Andrew Schneider, Executive Director of Fairness West Virginia, and the only full-time lobbyist exclusively working on LGBTQ issues in West Virginia. He is working now to pass the 21st local civil rights ordinance to protect LGBTQ people. And among the bills Andrew defeated last session was one that would have overridden any local civil rights protections for LGBTQ people. That bill passed the state Senate, but due to some quiet lobbying, failed to pass the House of Delegates and died, which pleases Mayor Betsy in Wardensville. Mitch Carmichael was West Virginia's Secretary of Economic Development when I interviewed him last fall. He's since left government and is now working in a new business development role for LG Electronics. This episode is part of a series we're calling Living at Odds. You can hear the rest of the series in the Slate podcast, How To. Host Courtney Martin will introduce you to a MAGA supporter and a Kamala Harris fan who sold political merch at the same intersection. And Amanda Ripley introduces us to two public school officials in Oklahoma who started out at loggerheads, and then that shifted as they served together during the pandemic. Again, that whole Living at Odds series is in the podcast feed for How To. There's also a link in our show notes. Do check it out. Thanks to Courtney Martin, Joel Meyer, Maura Curry, and Rosie Belson for working with us on this series. Death, Sex, and Money is produced by Slate. This episode was produced by me with help from Zoe Ajoulay and Cameron Drews. Andrew Dunn is also on the Death, Sex, and Money team. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer. Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. If you want more Death, Sex, and Money, please join Slate Plus to unlock exclusive bonus episodes, at least 2 a month. You'll also get access to ad-free listening across all your favorite podcasts from Slate. You can subscribe directly from the Death, Sex, and Money show page on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or visit slate.com/DSM Plus to get access wherever you listen. Our theme music is by the Reverend John DeLure and Steve Lewis. If you are new to our show, welcome. We are glad you're here. You can find us and follow us on Instagram at DeathSexMoney, and subscribe to my weekly newsletter. It's at annasale.substack.com. And you can reach us anytime with voice memos, pep talks, questions, or critiques. Our email address is deathsexmoney@slate.com. We love hearing from you. I'm Anna Sale, and this is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. This episode is brought to you by Discover. If you've listened to Death, Sex, and Money for a while, you know how important acceptance is when it comes to personal growth. And you know who else is big on acceptance? Discover. You see, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. That's a whole lot of places and a whole lot of acceptance, which is great for Discover, but even better for you. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast. Money can be confusing. Should you invest in ETFs, get a travel rewards credit card, buy a house, or just build a really fancy pillow fort?
That could work. No shame in pillow fort game. Or you could just tune in for clear, research-backed financial insights.
I'm Sean Piles, a certified financial planner professional.
And I'm Elizabeth Ayola. We're the hosts of NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast, where you bring the money questions and we bring trustworthy information backed by NerdWallet's expert analysis, without the jargon or the sales pitch.
Our nerds do the research so you don't have to. We'll help you understand your options so you can make the best decision for your situation, from optimizing your investments and maximizing credit card rewards to making big money moves with confidence.
Plus, we keep it real. No lectures, no judgment. Just tips and tools you can use to build wealth and take control of your finances. Think of us as your financial GPS, helping you navigate your money decisions and avoid expensive wrong turns.
Whether you're planning for retirement, weighing a big purchase, or just want to make your money work harder for you, we've got insights that you can use in real life.
So, if you want practical, straightforward, and actually useful financial knowledge, plus a little bit of fun along the way, follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Trust us, future you will thank you.